So, hello, Joel. Welcome. It's so great to have you here. We've got a fair few questions to cover tonight, and we're really excited to hear your perspective and experiences. And thank you so much for being a part of this program and supporting our Masters in Counselling students. It's great to have you. Joel, can I start off by just asking you to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Joel. I'm 36 years old. Mental health and addiction is something I've struggled with all my life. I've been clean for almost 13 years now, which is really awesome.
Yes.
I've had a few hiccups along the way, but maintained sobriety and cleanliness most of the time. So
That's great. No, that's all right. I'll ask you the next question. So, Joel, can you briefly talk about the circumstances that led you to initially seek the support of a counsellor?
Yeah, sure. So, the first real counsellor that I saw was in 2008. I was first diagnosed with drug-induced schizophrenia in December 2005.
Yeah.
Between 2005 and 2007, I did see therapists, but I wasn't really paying attention to when I was going to appointments. It's more like because I had to. So that was a part of my recovery where I was really inactive, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'll use my first real therapist, which was a clinical psychologist. That I saw from 2008 to 2012. So I was referred to her by my GP. They both worked in the same building at first. And the main reason, the first reasons that I went there was to deal with anxiety. So at the time I was experiencing panic attacks maybe 4 to 6 times a day, and just an ongoing kind of this anxiety disorder. So that really just ruled my life. It was at the forefront. So that's all I wanted to deal with. I didn't understand that there were all these other problems that I could potentially start to work with, or that I didn't really even understand that there was anything I could do about them. So all I was focused on was working on my anxiety, because I knew that was something I could work on. So there's a bigger backstory to why I got there. Do you want me to go into...
If you'd just like to briefly share, we have your synopsis and the students have access to that, which has been really helpful.
Yeah.
But if there's anything particular that you think would be important to highlight in regards to that story, please feel free.
So the reason why I did use in the first, I ever even started using was for trauma, I guess as a way to combat the trauma experience as a child. So growing up, there's a lot of an abusive household. So by the age of 8, I was starting to try to find my own ways to cope. That was in the form of any kind of chemical that would kind of drowse me out, make me feel a bit blacking out what was going on in my mind. And it started with things like sniffing textures and glue and chroming and things like that. And then by age 12, 13 was starting to use marijuana and things like that. And then later in my teens, I started to develop an addiction to speed and then ecstasy, and then it moved on to harder things like opiates and heroin, and then back to crystal meth, which seemed to be my DOC for the one that I kept seemed to coming back to. So
when you say DOC, you mean drug of choice?
Drug of choice, yeah. I was never a polysubstance user.
Yep.
I would always, whatever substance I was using, it was just that, and it was abusing it to the maximum. So that was kind of my I guess the way I used. So yeah.
And Joel, what has it been like to experience issues with addiction?
Now, like, what is it like to experience?
Yeah, and previously, if you could maybe do a contrast perspective on the both, that'd be great.
Like, back when I was an active user, like from 2007 and below, like, I didn't, like, the only, like, it was more like a day-to-day kind of survival thing. So I remember feeling like really strong emotions of sadness, suicidal, you know, idealization, all that kind of thing, all that kind of stuff. Don't remember feeling happy, no matter how much drugs I took. But yeah, I remember always quite feeling overwhelmed. Nothing was ever never enough. So no matter how much I did abuse the drug, it never seemed to work. I understand that now, but back then I didn't. So yeah, but like now, like looking back on it, there's like people say, you know, live without regrets, but like I do have a lot of regrets because the drug use that I did, you know, that I was involved in, has taken a part of me, and it feels like that part will never be back. Kind of feels like a part of my brain has gone forever, and I'm never going to get that back, no matter how hard I do work on myself. And I have came very far in the last, you know, few years, but that there's still like a feeling of something that is lost in there. So
yeah,
just kind of stuck with me. So yeah,
I think you paint such an articulate picture of the contrast of using and now being in recovery. Thank you so much for that. Can you remember what your impressions of the counsellor or the therapist, and you mentioned a psychologist, were when you began the counselling process?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, the psychologist that I was seeing was in the same building as my GP. I had already built up a rapport with my GP. So I guess I went into the sessions trusting. I was very anxious at the time. It was probably hard to get at a sentence. It was more just like jittery, lots of words. So, but I mean, she made me feel very comfortable.
Yep. How did she do that?
I guess using a lot of like ACT, CBT kind of techniques, just talk therapy. She didn't talk down to me. And first impressions last year, and like with her, they lasted. Like she was the same person who she was from the first appointment right through to the last. So that showed that was actually who she was.
Yep.
And that meant a lot to me. I understand, you know, like having to put on a facade and things like that, but for her to have someone that was trustworthy, that you could confide in, and that was genuine, that's just who they were as a person, was quite incredible. So, yeah.
So there was that level of genuineness and authenticity within her, that sounds like, that really kind of helped facilitate that sense of trust.
Yeah, definitely.
In what was happening.
And as I said, like I've had therapists before her, but I'd never fully engaged. It was more like say being in the system and having to go to appointments and things like that. So I didn't see it as a form or like a weapon of something that can help me get better. It was more like I had to go, I had to do that, I had to do this, and it was more just like something I had to do. So, but when I started seeing her, it was something that like I was fully engaged in, something that you know, I guess like I had this, like, you know, like she never gave me the answers or anything. She you know, she helped me work towards the answers and figure them out for myself, and that was a learning thing in itself. Being able to like pretty much for the first time in my life actually work things out for myself, like with her help, but and not be told the answers, because I think like growing up, like I was given the answers or just found quick answers.
Yes.
So to finally be able to like start to work out my life like was like just beyond words. It's incredible. So
yeah. And we talk a lot in counselling about self-efficacy, which is that inner belief that you can do something.
Yeah.
It sounds like to me that's what you're talking about, that this counselling process in a way gave you, is that internal sense that you can facilitate change.
Yeah, definitely. She placed all the tools in front of me and then let me at my kind of own pace. I'm sure she kind of pushed me in the right direction a lot.
Yep.
But it was more like a supportive role rather than even a mentoring role. Like it was more like, I support you through this, or like, rather than, you need to head in that direction or this, or you need to go there. I was able to do it at my own kind of pace. But as I started to actually get through humps and things, like I got through the anxiety, I got through the panic attacks and things like that, I started to want to, start to search like other areas of my life, like my paranoia, all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah.
Thank you, Joel. Can I ask you what aspects, and you've already named a few, but what other aspects of the counselling process did you find useful?
Yeah. Again, like it was like for the first time in my life, I was actually, I was actually like trying to figure out life and making it work without the help of drugs or in the wrong direction. So, there's so many
And obviously it seems like to me you'd had quite an extensive process with this counsellor. And so you probably had journeyed together through lots of different landscapes and lots of different sort of techniques and approaches and things to think about, it seems.
And I definitely, she definitely did, like looking back, she definitely did try a number of different things. Like I remember, things like the happiness trap, mindful kind of approaches, and then more actually go out and do it kind of approaches, like the approach to like with my panic and things like that was to kind of like the whole kind of flood or fight kind of thing, like placing myself in the worst possible kind of position to get through that fear, and doing things like that worked. So yeah, they're
great examples. Thank you for sharing those. Can you recollect, and again you've named the happiness trap, which is something we've already mentioned in this course, but can you recollect any specific approaches or resources in the counselling sessions that benefited you?
That book helped a lot along the way. Maybe like little things, like the lighting in the room. So there was always a little bit dimmer in the room, and that was, for me, that was it might seem like a little thing, but for me that was a massive thing. It was non-confrontational. It was more relaxed. It wasn't kind of like a classic setup in a room, like there's a beanbag in the corner, like kind of like, I guess, like touchy, like stuff that you can kind of like heavy things you could put in your lap and things like that. So it was really kind of relaxed room. You could walk in there and sit where you wanted. So like that would kind of set the tone like in your head before you even walked in the room, because you knew that that's how the room was and that's how the setup was. So that alone would take away all the the insecurities and doubts and things like that before even going in there. So but like as I mentioned, like her, like I guess, integrity and her personality was like what kept me gravitated
Yes.
and kept me wanting to get better, because there'd been so many, I guess, like false or fake people in my life, people, you know, manipulative and things like that. So yeah, like there's so many, like
Joel, are there any aspects of the counselling process that you didn't find useful? And if there were, what can you name what they were?
One little thing that I know it's a bit silly, but
No,
like
not at all.
was when it came to, like, it was she said she was a clinical psychologist. I saw her through the public system, so I would get 18 sessions with her a year.
Yep.
When those sessions were up, she would see me I would pay an extra $50 per session, and paying that extra $50, and because by that time I was a lot more well, so it felt funny. Like, I understand now, like, you know, obviously having to pay for a service, but it felt funny, like paying money to get better. Like, I don't know, it's just like an odd kind of thing to kind of go through my head, like.
Yep.
Yeah, that was just like a thing that I thought at the time, I guess. So yeah,
That's really interesting. So are you sort of trying to say there that, you know, to pay to get well, shouldn't that be a service that's facilitated to anyone that's wanting to get well? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it just, like, at the time it seemed. Like, I remember, so, like, especially in the last, like, year that I saw her, she encouraged me to press charges against my father for the sexual abuse that I experienced when I was a kid from 6 to 8 years old. So, and during that time, like I remember paying $300 for like a kind of like a written up statement for her to give to the police.
Right.
And like little things like that made me like question, like, it's like I'm paying for like my own, I don't know, it's just, I don't know, like, how to put it into words.
I think I understand what you're saying, that sense of having to pay for your own, in a way, process of justice and healing.
Yeah. And it's not to, like, say, like, that psychologists aren't worth the money, because they definitely are. It was just, like, that thing in my head. It was, like, because growing up, I was used to having to pay for everything. Like, pay for drugs, pay for this, to get my own way. And then, you know, something was working, and then I was still paying. Yeah. So it was just like a funny kind of like thing that was going on in my head. So yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that perspective.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So overall, as a client, Joel, what professional qualities of the counsellor were important to you? So things like trustworthiness, empathy. Yeah. What sort of attributes can you sort of think of that you think were really vital?
Being there's so many, like actually really listening to what the client is saying, being able to, I guess, empathise and understand, but not sympathise, because that is I guess, enabling almost in a way. So
Can you elaborate a bit on that, the sympathise versus the empathise? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So in the past, I've had experiences where people are very sympathetic with me, and that has gotten nowhere. Like, it might have made me feel a little bit better at the time, but at the end of the day, I didn't move forward from that thing or whatever it was. So whereas I guess with like the empathy and the understanding, like there's a part where that it's like, okay, that understand that, and then there's a moving on kind of process. So I remember before I saw this psychologist, I saw a psychiatrist who was mainly for prescribing medication, and there was a lot of sympathising. So, and that didn't really get anywhere. Like, it was just, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising that. Any other attributes that you can think of that benefited you in the counselling process?
Being as honest as possible.
Yeah.
Like admitting, like, if you don't know something, like it's like it's like a strength to say that if you don't understand something, like, just like kind of admit it rather than try to, like, BS around, like go curvy around it, because at the end of the day the person's gonna work it out, if not at that time, or they're gonna work it out maybe a year or two down the track, and then they're gonna look back on that experience as like, oh, it was okay, but it was good, but she was, or he was a bit, so it's going to like leave like a lasting kind of impression, and that can actually like have an effect on that person's life. So I think being honest is like, very important.
Yep. Yeah, wonderful. So how have your need need for counselling changed over time, from the beginning of your journey into therapy to up until now?
Yeah. So at first I needed a lot of therapy. So, regular sessions, like bi-monthly at least. And then plus there were other forms of therapy, I guess, like things like NA, other alternative groups and things like that. So, and that over the years, like especially from 2007 to now, it's gotten less and less and less. Like there was a point early in my recovery where I was like seeing 3 specialists, and then extra groups and things like that. And over the last couple of years, it's got to the point where like I do see a psychologist, but I see her once every 6 or 7 months. So I don't have, like, other than in the community and that, I don't have any I guess other than my GP, structured kind of support. So that's definitely changed. I guess I've learnt to rebuild. I've been able to rebuild my life. So became self-sufficient. So not needing to lean so much on other people. So much I can lean more on myself.
Yep.
So even when things get tough, like I get paranoid or delusional or whatever, because all those symptoms do still come up with the drug-induced schizophrenia. I know what to do now, and that's because I learnt during the therapies of how to get through things like this and be able to do it without needing to say use an acute service or need to go back and start using an extra regime of meds or need to start seeing someone regularly to get myself back on track. I'm able to get myself back on track to the most of my knowledge. I'm sure there are times over maybe 2 or 3 years ago where I did have an acute kind of lapse, and I did have to have a 2-week inpatient stay at a place called Park. But other than that, I'm good. Yeah.
Great. And have you identified any sort of aspects through your experience of counselling and being in therapy and your experience with addiction, any sort of gains or benefits or learnings that have really sort of held you in good stead moving forward?
Yeah, as I said, I've got regrets, but I also think I've got a much different take on life than, say, if I hadn't gone through all the addictions and mental health kind of struggles. I think the way I see life now is I think I've got a lot of like gratitude, you know, maybe more like wanting to understand people or understand myself rather than kind of just flick over the pages. So like a willingness and a want to learn, not just about myself but about others and what's in my, you know, community or just in general is a lot higher than from what I see around me. And that's not like judging anyone or anything around me. It's just I just feel like I'm like more like I don't know, like I've got an extra maybe edge on certain things. So yeah.
That's a lovely analogy, you know, you're not flicking over the pages. I really like that idea, but it sounds like to me what you're saying is you're sort of looking at the deeper levels and understandings of life.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Like, I would, like, if a problem presents to me, rather than, like, maybe being non-confrontational or putting up a wall and then just like pretending it doesn't exist, I'll like kind of examine it and then like try to work it out and then move forward. So that's kind of the way I think in general. So it's become like, I guess, like second nature.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's a good attribute to have, like, or a good like kind of skill. So yeah.
Thank you, Joel. Do you think things have changed since you first started to deal with addiction? For example, is there less stigma now around addiction?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is the one question I thought about before coming here.
Please share your insights.
I think like back in say like 2005, 2006, 2007, my understanding of myself was nowhere near where it is now. So even if all the opportunities that are presented to me now and in the last maybe 2, 3, 4 years, if they were presented to me earlier on in my recovery or when I first started my recovery, I wouldn't have known what to have done with them. I don't know if they have existed. So, and that goes for like the whole like being stigmatized too. I don't know if, like, let's say if I had just come off drugs now, I don't know if the stigma would be the same now as it would have been when I first came off. Because I know people's minds have changed in the way they think about addiction and mental health in general, but on a personal level, like I don't think it would have mattered for me, like if it was 20 years ago or 30 years into the future. Like I think I still would have gone through all those nitty gritty things that I had to go through. So I didn't really care about the whole bigger picture or the public or even in my community. It was more about self, and it still is. So like for me, stigma like honestly has not been a massive problem for me. I've never worried too much about it. So yeah. I honestly think the word is more daunting and the thing that goes around it than the actual stigma that people talk about is. Like I can't process it. Maybe that might be it. I'm just not able to process other people's thoughts and things like that as much, maybe. So, but that's just my take on it. So,
and I wonder if it's a bit of a presumption then that maybe we're making too, that there is a stigma. When from what you're sharing with us, that hasn't been necessarily the case for you. I think that's a great point of learning for us. Not to make presumptions in that regard.
And as I said, that's from me personally, like for myself, like that's how I see it. And I know for other people, like it's a massive problem for them, and I can understand that to a certain extent, but then there's like, I can't process it that far, so maybe that's like part of like my whole personality kind of, I don't know, like, that's just being honest. So,
no, I really appreciate the honesty, Joel.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, and it was a very comprehensive answer.
Yeah.
It's really evident you have thought about it, so thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just mindful of time, so there's a few more questions and then we might go to Left Earist to see if we've got any from our students. What is it like for you to talk about your experience with addiction?
It brings back a lot of old kind of like thoughts, emotions, like not like say like thinking about using or anything. It just like brings back memories and different thoughts and feelings I had in my early days of recovery, and then also like when I was a user. So like I can like float in and out of those emotions and thoughts, like, or more thoughts than emotions, but I can kind of like think and then I kind of float back out. So like it's fine. Like, I mean, like, to talk about it openly like this maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I wasn't so well would have been a really difficult thing. So I think it's like I'm in a much better place now to be able to talk about it. So yeah.
And did dealing with addiction, and I think again you've already touched on a number of these things already, change how you see yourself? And if so, how has it changed you?
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question
No, that's
again?
okay, and I just saw you looking at the questions and we've just turned the page, which is why I've been tricking you. But did dealing with addiction, Joel, change how you see yourself? And if so, how?
Yeah, definitely. Like, earlier on, like when I say earlier on, the first 2 or 3 years of my recovery, I don't think I was very limited in the way I saw myself. I almost didn't even understand what it meant to be a person was. I didn't understand what it meant to be a person. Like, I didn't understand anything like that. So it just went right over my head. But now I guess like with like exploration and understanding and like a willingness to like change, like now, like I see like so many things in a newer light, not a different light, because there was never an original light that I saw them in. It was just like a nothing, like just like a darkness, like it's an understandable, don't go there because I don't understand it thing. So I think it's given me like an interesting perspective, a different one probably, but like one maybe the world needs. So
Absolutely. I think the world definitely needs differing perspectives. And a final question from your view as a client, what are the key points that you think counsellors need to consider when working with clients experiencing addiction?
The whole picture, like, so the whole time I was seeing my therapist, I was clean, but I still had so many problems that I was dealing from my past life, so to speak. So like an understanding that like we're like, just like everyone, we're all at different like parts of our lives, like different levels or different steps. That like with an ex-addict or an addict, it's exactly the same. So it's just the same. So like just like the more you can relate to your client as a person rather than client here and then you're here, when you can both be on the same level, or even better, the client's a little bit above you and then you bring it down to the same level. That's like a really beautiful thing, because then that means that the client, regardless of whether they're an active addict or a struggling addict or a recovering addict or whatever it is, they'll start to open up a lot more. You know, they'll gain trust and all those kinds of things. So, yeah, it's like, do the math, like, just like you would, treat, your spouse or your like, you don't need to go, it's like, but how you treat other people, you just, it's just like, just kind of being like that, like in your clinic or wherever it is. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really, thank you for mentioning that. And I've talked to that with some of the MOC students about that power imbalance and trying to keep a sense of equality. And I even use my hands like you've just done in regards to describe that. So it's really wonderful to hear you talk about that from a client perspective. And for us as counsellors, I think those sorts of things that you've mentioned are really important for us to feel connected to and remember.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joel.
That's okay. That's fine.
Would you mind just taking a few questions from our students?
Yeah, totally fine. Shoot away. That's
wonderful.
Cool.
Via Lefteris. Lefteris, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Joel. That's really insightful and really interesting to hear you talk about your story. There's been a few questions from students. First of all, Renata is asking, hi, Joel. Have you ever tried group therapy? If so, was it helpful?
Yeah. Earlier on, group therapy didn't work for me. I remember being part of a couple of smaller... I can't even remember who it was with. It was with a local non-for-profit, and they were running weekly groups. That didn't... Which way should I look?
Any way you feel comfortable.
That didn't work for me. That really didn't work for me. I felt uncomfortable. I needed that extra support, like that under that one-on-one kind of. I needed that earlier on. Thinking now, groups, like it's kind of fine. Like now, like I'm trying to think of a recent example. It's fine. Like, it's good. It's fine now. Like, I guess now that I actually understand myself, I've got so much more. I know who I am. So I guess I'm more confident. I'm more comfortable with talking in groups. So now that's not an issue. So yeah. I hope I answered that question okay for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure the students would have found this helpful. Another question that comes from another student by Davina is saying, where is it? Actually, a couple of students asked this. It's Bree and Davina asked this at different times. That's why I thought it was worth asking. They say, I often wonder how addicted people are for the drugs or alcohol, especially at such a young age. Does it involve taking from parents or something else? Is that a relevant question? They're wondering if this is a relevant question. So feel free to not answer this.
Totally.
Okay.
Think about it this way, like, if you needed food and you were, say, 12 or 13 and no one was providing it for you, you would find a way to get that food into your stomach, whether it was stealing, doing whatever, like you would do anything to get that. And that's the way an active addict quite often will see it. It's not, a drug is not something that is taken just because for the sake of it, or because it's like it'll make me feel okay for a bit. When you're really addicted, you need that drug. So just like you need food, you will do anything to get that drug, whether it means stealing from your parents, stealing from your partner, robbing people, selling drugs, horrible things like prostituting your girlfriend. There's nothing you won't do to get your necessity. It's terrible, but that's just the way it is.
Thank you. For sharing this with us. Another question from Devin is saying, Joel, what was the most challenging aspect of the counselling process, or times when you felt like discontinuing therapy?
Yeah, I remember about 2 or 3 years into seeing that clinical psychologist I was talking about. It started to get deep when it started to involve me going ahead and pressing charges, as I was talking about before, and that's when I was kind of getting to the end of my rope. I was really stressed out about it, because it was all brand new to me. There was all these new emotions and thoughts that I was feeling, and I remember really feeling like I wanted to give up, but that was the hardest part for me. And actually being able to see it through though was a relief. So does that
Thanks. The way you're saying it. And by the way, the students who asked the previous questions are also thanking you for being honest, and they found your answers quite powerful already.
Oh, good. If they've got any questions when it comes, because I'm very open and raw and honest, especially when it comes to my past problems with addictions and stuff like that, because I think a lot of people will skip over that and not be really directly honest, like I was just then. So if you can pull out more stuff out of me that will be beneficial to you guys, go for it. So I'm an open book with that. So
that's wonderful.
Thanks for your willingness to be honest and open about it. It's really important and really helpful. And if other questions pop up, I'll let you know. In the meantime, Alex asked a question saying, have you had to completely change your circle of friends? And how do you handle things if someone in your social group uses substances?
When I first gave up drugs in 2005, I lost all my friends bar 4 friends. So I lost my whole community, and that was probably for the good, but I had to kind of rebuild again. So now and now I've built up a good group, a community, a good group of friends that I do trust. Most of them are I've got a friend who's a nurse, another friend who's in aged care, so they all kind of work in the same kind of industry. None of them have had, some of them had alcohol problems, and they've had to deal with that. For me, alcoholism was never a massive problem, so it didn't really affect me. But to be honest, I have, in the last few years, I've had kind of not good friends, but friends who've came back into my life, and they've been using, and I cut it off, their friendship. I just cut it off, and I was probably very rude about it, but I knew I needed to do that for me to stay clean, me to stay okay, because it would be very easy. If it's like the saying, you are the worst of your 5 friends or whatever it is. If I had someone continually in my life who was using, I would most likely go back down that route again, because to be honest, it is the easier one. And the thing with addiction is it will come back to haunt you again and again and again. So having the right walls up and having the right friends is so important.
So you're really talking about those protective factors and your own self-care and protection above others.
Yeah, definitely, There's been so many times where I've had to put myself first, and it felt really weird, felt horrible. But if I hadn't, I most likely would have relapsed. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks. Do you mind answering a couple more questions?
Sure,
We still
sure.
have about 8 minutes or so. Bree is asking, did having to pay for sessions make you want to, or actually reduce the number of sessions you had with your therapist? I think this came up when you were talking about the money.
Yeah. So when I started paying for sessions, I started to think, all right, I've got to space out the sessions and things like that. And at the time, I needed those regular sessions, but at the time, I wasn't working or anything. I was on disability support pension, and like $50, like a fortnight was a massive deal for me. So like not being like selfish or anything, but like it was just really hard to come by that money. So and like, but I also needed that therapy in my life. So it was like, I actually remember like cutting out things out of my life, like, you know, like I remember like putting money towards internet for my mum. Like I took that out, like to go towards therapy. And it's not like a feel sorry for me or sob story or anything, but that's just actually how it was for me. That's how I thought about it at the time. So yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. We have a question by Renata again saying, could I ask what Joel thinks about inpatient treatment? Can it be traumatic at times?
Definitely. I guess it depends on how your headspace is when you are in that inpatient treatment or inpatient, like a psych ward. I've had 8 or 9 stays in psych wards over the years, especially in the earlier. I haven't had one for the last 4 or 5 years, but like in my earlier recovery times, like. Yeah, I was in and out of psych wards all the time. And for me, it was traumatic because I wasn't in a good place. So, like, I guess it comes down to how that person is at the time. And usually that person's in inpatient unit for a reason because they're unwell. And they've maybe, like, there's no other way to go but to go into that inpatient unit because that's like the last kind of option, and it usually is for the person. So it is traumatic. Like there's not much to do there in psychiatric units, whether they're private ones or public ones. There's no structure or routine. So like, you know, like you kind of like die a little bit inside a bit more, and then you just want to leave. You just want to get out of there, but you're not getting any kind of therapeutic goodness or wellness into your life. So it's kind of like when you are in an inpatient unit, it's just like a time, and then once it's over, it's over, and it hasn't been good or bad. It's just been there to fill that point in your life where there was nothing else. That's.
Thanks. I'm sure this covers this question very comprehensively. Thank you.
Good.
One of the last things I'd like to ask you, Joel, is a question from Devin, who is asking. He's saying thanks first of all. And then Devin is saying, could I also ask if spirituality or religion helped, or if there were other sources of strength?
Yeah. So, with spirituality, like, I like thinking it like with like religion, like I did follow like, I guess like a Pentecostal kind of religion for about 3 years. So from 2009 to 2012, 2013. So I was very involved in like the whole kind of charismatic church kind of thing. So, and for me at the time that helped. I guess if you're a believer, you're a believer.
Mm-hmm.
So I believed, and it was good. I guess the one thing that I don't have, and not being a Christian now, not being in a church, is I don't have that community that I did have in that church. So in that church, I found a really good community of really good people. And that played a massive role in my life. And when I think about it now, I don't have that ongoing full community around me now, just revolving around me. So that played a lot to do with the actual being a believer and going to church and things like that. So, but now I guess like spiritually, like I do think about stuff like that a lot, like God and about myself and what everything means and things like that. And the only way I kind of tackle it, I guess, is with mindfulness, like, is kind of stopping and actually just breathing through it all and kind of like, you know, getting into like, I guess, like higher states of like, you know, of meditation, like, you know, like astral travel and things like that, like little things like that, like, kind of open up my world. So yeah, that's just like being a bit different, but that's being honest. So yeah.
Thank you.
And this is probably earlier on, like when I was first diagnosed with schizophrenia, there was probably times when like religion played a massive part in my life, but it wasn't real. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Joel, thank you so much for your honesty and your insight and your willingness to support all of our prospective counselling students out there. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's been very enlightening. And again, I think this is something that our students seem to be responding really positively to. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks, Sophie. You too.
Yes, and I've really just enjoyed listening to all of your responses to these questions. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're
Thanks for having me,
welcome.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
The students are texting their thanks as well.